I'm back on my commie bullshit. Here's episode 245. I'm with my friend Charles here, as you all remember him as I guess I outed you as Rico or Nico or whatever I called you in this Open Amendment
No, it's all
episode.
good.
Um,
We didn't say
so
nothing too questionable, so I think
too
we're all right.
questionable. I mean, which is surprising considering my sense of humor. But I want to welcome everyone here today. We're going to be talking about imperialism in the modern era, specifically what's going on in the Russo-Ukrainian war and how America is sticking its big meaty claws in everything, including that conflict. And one of the reasons me and Charlie may be drafted. Anyway, um, I know this is going to piss a lot of you off, but I am decidedly against American intervention in this conflict because I really don't care about Ukraine or Ukrainians or Russia or Russians. Um, yeah.
You're the
So
first honest guy that said that. That's interesting. Most
yeah.
Americans pretend that they care.
Yeah, bro, exactly. Like for me, honestly, like okay, so full disclosure, as everyone remembers, like I used to be a very active member of the communist movement. So for me, um, this conflict is a personal one because, looking at the Second World War especially and seeing how the Soviet people, Ukrainians, Russians, Belarusians, Kazakhs, Lithuanians, all these people came together to defeat Nazism and pushed back not only physically the Nazi regime, but pushed back on the ideology of an inferior race because here the Slavs were seen as subhuman and they defeated the Aryans, right? So it flies in the face and really is the final death knell of racial superiority in any sense of the word, being a legitimate science and is relegated instead to the pseudosciences. So seeing the great history and success and struggles of the Soviet Union and the Soviet people in this time and then moving forward, really inspired me as a person when looking back at my own struggles and my own personal problems, and then helped me also become a better educated person by learning about such a complex history. So to see these two countries rip each other apart is really devastating for me. So I don't take this lightly when I say this, but this conflict is none of our business because it's a brother war. It's between it would be like if someone intervened in the American Civil War. You know what I mean? Like that's our business. Everyone else needs to fuck off. And for the most part, most people did. It was really just between the North and the South. No other nations got involved. Even though they wanted to, they're like, nah, let them beef,
Yeah,
bro. Let them beef. See what they do.
yeah, pretty incredible.
It
Um,
was.
I just find it interesting that a lot of Americans seem to they drape their Ukrainian flag over their house or whatever. It's like, what are you doing? you
I
know,
see that all the time in Belport Village, bro. I see that all the time. It's like
I'd
I
love
don't
for
know,
them to get drafted.
bro. Please, I would that would make my day. That would absolutely make my day. I I don't get it. They care more about Ukraine than their own country. Half the time they think it's racist to fly an American flag, but then like Ukraine actively has like neo-Nazi militias drafted into the Ukrainian army, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Azov
As
Battalion,
of time, yep.
yay!" It's like it's so ironic seeing gay people and trans people supporting Azov, and I'm like, you do know they would kill you, right? Like those are genuine Nazis. Like when we say like neo-Nazi militias in Ukraine, like it's not like how it's normal to have a militia in the United States. Like
hmm
there's militia, like guns were like very heavily restricted in Ukraine up until the war. So to have a militia means you were a terrorist organization. Like these guys were terrorists and
What in
now
the
they're not.
Azov battalion you talking about?
Yeah, bro. Like you can't have guns and fucking like they that was an illegal militia. It was terrorism. They committed, actions before, in the lead up to the Euromaidan protests in 2014. Like they committed attacks against Ukrainian communists and trade unionists. And that's really
Really?
how all this
I didn't
started.
know
Oh
about
yeah.
this.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a huge 2010 to 2014 there was like a lot of beef between the Ukrainian communists and the Ukrainian fascists. And one
hmm
of the events that was the lead up to Euromaidan was when this Union Hall got lit on fire and they started shooting inside, like the neo-Nazis started shooting inside and it killed a couple of communists and trade unionists. And then
Really?
there was other like part things that were going on in the country at the time. with austerity measures and political corruption and influence from Russia. So everyone was pissed off because they're like, yo, we wanted to be a part of Europe. And you motherfuckers are saying, oh, never mind, we're going to back out on the deal, meaning like the president. And Parliament was pissed. And then there was the Civil War, and not Civil War, but there was like basically the start of the Civil War. So the protests turned into a civil war, or what would be commonly known as a color revolution by anti-imperialists. And a color
Mhm.
revolution is basically like um very peaceful changing of power, but then it ended up being like a full-fledged civil war in 2015, 2016 with the Luhansk and Donbass republics getting shelled by Ukraine, and then Donbass and Luhansk fighting back, and Donbass and Luhansk were supported by Russia. And it's a confusing mess, and it's like we literally just got out of Afghanistan. Like, why are we fucking around? Like, why? Now, I know why. It's because if there's a war that's happening, our military industrial complex needs to sell, because if they don't, these businesses go out of business. So that's really my
Gotta sell those stonks.
the stonks go brrr.
I don't know if you looked, but if you looked right after the this whole thing started when Russia initially invaded,
Mm.
if you looked at the stocks, they went, totally to the
They
roof.
blew.
All the
They
heavy
blew up in a
hitters.
good way. Oh my god, yeah, Lockheed, Raytheon,
Yep, Raytheon
everything.
stocks went up.
Legalize nuclear
Boeing
bombs.
stocks, all that stuff.
No, literally. I mean, see, and what's crazy too, like, yeah, the communications companies, of course, they went up because all the, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, they all have contracts with the military too. Of course, they're gonna go up. And overall, like, this is what bothers me about American support for Ukraine is that no one really knows about Ukraine, its history with Russia, um, and even like following like old neo-Nazi tropes, calling Russians ogres, um, hoping that we go to war with Russia, celebrating. This is even sick too. Like
The
we'll
one
see.
dimensionality.
It's
I've
very
talked
one-dimensional,
to
and
many people, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, no, Russia's like just one dimensional evil. All the people there are like this. They support the war." It's like, dude, what do you? It's
it's
not
how
like that. Like people in the U.S., like they're against the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, all this
it's
stuff.
like it's like how we looked at the Nazis in World War II and Germany. That's how it reminds me of. But the thing is,
How
this
they
isn't
look at
like,
Russia.
yeah, how they're looking at Russia. And it's Russia, and the Russian people are nothing even close to what the Nazis were. Nothing even close.
Oh yeah, no,
And
that's like a cheesy example
now
that white girls on Twitter use.
both sides are using, children as cannon fodder and abducting children and shipping them to each other's countries and saying, "Oh, we liberated these children. We're putting them in Russian orphanages." I think
Hmm.
that's sus. I don't think that's great. Every side does fucked up things in war. Let's not kid ourselves here either.
It's new though. Allegedly, it's new. If you talk to the Democratic Party and Joe Biden,
What do you
this
mean?
is a new thing. This is new. No, nobody's ever done this. Nobody ever hurt children in war.
Oh,
Only Russia's done
bullshit.
it.
Bullshit.
The one
Yeah,
dimensionality.
yeah, they conveniently forget that the Nazis took Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish children, tried to Aryanize them, and if they couldn't be Aryanized, they were just shot. Like they would shoot infants. So I don't
Also,
want to
we're
hear.
bought by Russia, by the way.
What'd you
You're
say?
gonna get that. We're probably bought by Russia, is what a lot of people tell us. We're getting a nice check.
Oh, maybe. I mean, I'm not too sure about that. Can you explain that a little more? Oh,
Nah,
us.
they just
Oh,
like to
us.
say you're a
Us.
Russian bot.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. People are gonna say I'm a Russian propagandist for saying this. Here's my position on the war. Like I said earlier, it's a devastating conflict, and I look at the old history of the peoples that lived there fighting fascism and looking forward to humanity. But
Hmm.
at the same time, like it's not our responsibility as a country to help these people. I mean, look at all the conflicts happening in the world: the Syrian conflict, the Libyan slave markets, the Yemeni civil war. I mean, we were involved in Yemen. Don't get me wrong, but no one cared. No one gave a shit, and it kind of goes to the racism of liberals because they didn't give a shit about these other conflicts, and now that white kids are getting killed, they care all of a suddenly. It's like self
That is
projection on their part.
interesting. I
Yeah,
have
they
thought about that.
yeah, well, liberals are very racist. So what I found out too is like when I was an organizer and stuff, like a lot of people, and even just like on my own journey through it and leaving that, it's like they literally like believe maybe like before they were, radicalized or whatever, like they were normal people, maybe they made like a off-color joke or remark here and there, but it was funny. And, everyone thought it was funny or they just blew it off or whatever. And then they realized, oh my God, I feel so guilty. I'm such a horrible person. I must be racist. Like once they got radicalized.
Hmm.
So they're like, "Oh my God, like, I can never say these words again." So they wanna say them. They wanna be racist. They wanna make racist jokes, or they wanna, bust someone's balls in a jovial, but, you know you know what I mean? Like in a silly way, like when you're fucking around with your boys, you know what I mean? It's like, "Oh, you're a fucking pussy. Stop being such a faggot." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that
like it's
type of shit.
meaningless.
Hey, like, it's
You're
meaningless.
obviously
You're just
you don't
busting
actually care.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not actually a homophobe. You don't hate, ethnic groups or sexual groups. It's just you're making a fun of someone, and they don't do that at all. And then they get mad when other people do it because they want to say it. So what I've noticed is that like a lot of liberals, like when they leave the movement, they go crazy, and some of them just go so far off the deep end because they felt like so restricted that they end up like literally just, like, becoming, like, racist as fuck. Or just, like, amplifying it because they've brainwashed themselves into thinking, "Oh, I'm white, so I must be racist," and then, like,
Mhm.
gaslighting themselves into
Fulfill
accepting
their own
racist
destiny.
positions. Yeah, yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy. Meanwhile, they coulda just been like, "Oh, that was all bullshit, whatever, I'm just gonna go be a normal person again," but no, they're insane because they literally brainwashed themselves to be radicals. Um but that's why I think, like, their support for Ukraine is so strong and their dehumanization of Russia is so strong. Like, I've seen, liberals call Russians orcs and,
Mhm. I've heard that, yeah.
and parasites. I'm like, dude, that's like an ethnic group. Like, I remember there were people that were afraid, like Russians, ethnic Russians in America, that were afraid to speak Russian. Communists were called Russians, and they were like, "Oh my God, you support Russia." And it's like, some communists do support Russia, don't get me like, unironically or like, yeah, they wave the Z thing and,
Mhm.
they're, like, totally they'll some of those communists will go in the complete opposite and be like, "Yeah, the Ukrainians are parasites and Nazis, they had it coming." And, on my end, it's just kind of like, "Yo, I'm just non-interventionist," because both sides are stupid on this. Like, the Russians are saying it's denazification, and the Ukrainians are saying they're defending their homeland when both of them are kinda wrong, both of them are kinda fucking with each other. Um I personally, to bring it back to the United States, because backpacking America, um,
Mhm.
I kind of, I we need to rebuild our country. I mean, a section of I-95 collapsed a couple of weeks ago in
Yeah, I've
Philly.
heard.
It's finally fixed. We have our
Oh, they
civil
did fix it?
liberties. Oh yeah, yeah, they did fix it at least
Okay.
temporarily. Um, we have our civil liberties getting eroded. We have wildfire season starting again. We don't have
Got a lot on our plate here.
We got a lot on our plate, and expanding empire is really not something we should be focusing on. Um, I'm on board with what Trump was saying, where NATO kind of needs to like everyone needs to chip in. The United States shouldn't be the hegemon leading it. Um, I I'm on two ends of this, where I don't want us to intervene in other people's affairs, but I'm also terrified of us losing superpower status and the dollar getting replaced by another currency.
Mhm.
So those are like the two contradicting thoughts I'm having right now because on one hand, because we're in the global hegemon role, we don't have much to worry about. But if we give that up, that means we need to be self-sustainable and everything. We're literally talking about a um shift radically in the social and economic fabric of our country by stopping that. And I feel like if
Like
we're
since
to
World War One change.
we'd have
Go
to go
back to
back to
pre-World War One type United
yes,
States, is what you're basically saying.
yes, yeah, and we'd have
I
to be
think I'd agree with
complete.
that.
We'd have to be completely self-sufficient, but we need to get there in a slow and steady pace and kind of step away from the global interconnected world because the global interconnected world, like if you're not on top, you will be crushed. And China wants to crush us and everyone around them. So what they see us as the immortal enemy, same with Iran. So if they get a chance to like get the upper hand, they're going to crush us and try to like liberate the rest of the world. Um, Then again, too, we also give people I'm not sure really how our foreign policy works, but I've heard it said that, like, we don't really expect repayments. Actually, no, that's bullshit. The International Monetary Fund does expect repayments. So I hear like a lot of conflicting stuff. Um, the thing is that if you're not in the annals of power, like it's hard to realize who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Honestly, the way I look at it is like the working people of both countries are getting fucked at the end of this deal. And I don't think getting us involved in a war is really going to help working people because what people forget too is that if we do go to war with Russia, we're going to war with China and Iran. And that is the third world war, and there will be a draft because the casualty rate will be high. So it's really like all the pro-Ukrainian people really have to think about this for a second, and all the pro, America people as well. In regards to a war with China, um, that means most of us will be drafted up until like our 30s. So you can be drafted, I think, up until 27. And then after that, I mean, the
Mhm.
draft age can always be increased if we lose casualty numbers high enough. I mean, we've seen it happen in Russia. So people can get drafted in a war, and the more you push for it and the more public support you give a war, the more likely you are to
What
create
create?
acceptance,
Yeah, there's a
manufacturing
lot of
consent.
acceptance for this war, which is really weird.
Yeah, like I don't know how you feel about this. Like, I don't know. Like, part of me, like, how do you feel about this whole conflict? Like, because I feel like I'm kind of worried about like part of me's like, yo, like if they invade the country, I'm throwing hands. We're laying down lead down range, bro. Like no cap. But if
Oh,
you're
obviously,
like,
they invaded the United States mainland. Yeah,
yeah, like that, you're catching these hands, whether we're on
that's
the
your
right side
civil
of history or
obligation.
wrong. Yeah. But the thing is that like we don't want to get to that point. So it's kind of like, yo, this war is wrong. So don't make us get to the point where we have to defend ourselves or be on the defensive. But the problem is too, people want to be on the offensive so that outcome never happens. But the thing is, if we just worked on peace and acceptance, this outcome would have never happened in the first place. They would have been like France or England to us. We could have just been cooperative. But no, we have, an ideological struggle going on between China, and we have a geopolitical struggle against Russia because we need to maintain the necessity of NATO because they're our allies. So, because if you remember in the 2000s, Russia wanted to join NATO, and NATO was like,
Yep.
nah, fuck you. So that's what kind of like, freaks me. I've been talking like a while, so I just want to hear your thoughts on like this whole situation.
Basically, nah, I just think that I find a lot of this like ironic, mostly, and
Mm,
I just think it's troubling that a lot of Americans are so quick to go to war.
mm.
And a lot of these people, like you got these white chicks, good-looking white chicks on Instagram, whatever, and they think that this is like a great thing. Love the Ukrainians. Nothing wrong with liking Ukrainian people, but Ukrainian government is a corrupt government. They've been known to do that, be corrupt, and
Mm,
Hunter Biden's son, getting a big deal over there for millions of dollars a year, big
mm.
salary. It's funny how it started, right when you know Biden's asterisk administration got put in there. Honk honk.
Honk, honk, wink, wink, sniff, sniff.
Not saying anything, but it was a little suspicious.
White House.
Yeah,
Okay.
cocaine in the White House. Nobody knows
Cocaine in the
where it's
White House.
from. It's a million cameras.
Oh, yep. Sorry, we have no
It's
idea where the
just,
cocaine came from.
I'm just so upset that the liberalism has died. It seems like I'm
Well,
kind of like a classical liberal, and like the liberals that I knew are just like they're pro-war. They're still anti-gun. That never changed.
oh, that's never gonna change. But it seems like what I've noticed is that the Republican Party seemed to have not totally.
Flip sides. It's like we switched again. I don't know.
We did, and it's more compatible with socialism than it ever was historically outside of the Civil War period and the Reconstruction era. So
If you, dude, if you look at like some of Trump's quotes, you're like, what? Like, okay, this guy was who? There's a Republican that said this.
yeah, it's like, whoa, we need to nationalize our manufacturing? Like, what? We need to nationalize oil? Like, well, he never said nationalize, but he's like, we need to drill for oil. We need to bring back our manufacturing. We need to be self-sufficient and self-sustainable so that way
Hmm.
we can be independent. I mean, that's something out of like a third world communist,
This is like,
leader.
yeah, this is like some liberal, maybe even communist in some cases stuff that they
That's
would say.
that's what I got. I mean, what I noticed too is that the communist movement in this country, there was a subset, and they're all full of weirdos. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was probably the most normal person in that entire movement nationally. and that's saying a lot because I'm fucking weird. Um, but they were like, this one group of them had like a good point until they, made it fucking weird, of course. Where they were like, yo, like the Republican Party and their base, like the way they're shifting, it seems to have a populist trend. And the way the Democrats shifted, it seems to have more of like an elitist end where they're pro capital, and the Republicans are more willing to sacrifice capital for national development. Like they're more focused on rejuvenating the nation. So, and keeping the working people, you know, alive. So why don't we just pander to the Republican base and adopt some of their points because they make sense with a lot of this shit. And that birthed like what was, and this is where it gets corny because like leftists are weird. They called it MAGA communism.
I think I've
And
heard of it. Yeah.
yeah, now what was found was that Russia actually did have a little bit of a play in that, where the guy that spearheaded it, Caleb Maupin, he was a reporter for the Russian Times, RT News, and he was getting bankrolled by the Kremlin.
Oh, I'm not
So
surprised.
yeah, so like, okay, like
Russia does scummy shit. It's
they
like it's
have.
obvious. They
And
have
so
and do currently.
every world power has. I mean, we do it too. We do stuff to, I mean, we funded what the hell was that guy? Alexander and something Navalny in Russia to try and
Oh yeah,
fuck
yeah.
with Putin in the 2020 elections. Um, Russia tried to well, I don't think they found evidence of Russia messing with our elections, or maybe they tried to, but
They
they've
found some troll farms. That was the
somewhat.
basically the closure in the whole Mueller investigation and all that.
What'd they find?
Trump's ties to Russia. They basically didn't find any ties, but they did find that Russia had some troll farms going on.
Oh, they had troll farms.
That are pretty much meaningless.
Oh yeah, so they were making memes. Okay. So
Some
they
guy
tried.
makes a Donald Trump meme in Russia, and apparently that's rigging the election.
He's rigging
It's,
the election.
it's
Oh,
not rigging the election though if you withhold information from the American people on Twitter and don't let things trend about Hunter Biden and Biden and all this stuff.
oh yeah, that's
That's okay
totally
though.
acceptable. That's totally acceptable. But then, the guy in
Perfectly good
Russia
election.
making memes is the bad guy. Um, so I mean, so with the war, it's just kind of like that's just like the shit that we got to deal with, man. And it's like the new age, but it's the same old tricks. Um, Propagandists and whatnot. What really bothers me about all of it too is that we keep spending like the NATO summit. That freaked me out. And we're adding more NATO members. It's like we're walking up to and someone said it perfectly on Twitter. We're walking up to the line of war and we're begging Russia to shoot first.
It
And
does seem that way.
well, you know what it is? I mean, Russia was like, yo, we're a new country. Soviet Union fell. All we're just gonna ask, bro, is like, can you guys just keep NATO like over there? We're gonna say like over here because I think at the time like Germany was fully in it, Denmark was in it, all these other countries were in it,
Talking
and
the
there was
mid
like a
'90s, right?
or late 90s or
Or
early
Slovenia
2000s,
stuff.
and we were just Russia was just kind of like, all right, like kind of keep a neutral buffer because like that was crazy, like we almost blew ourselves up over this shit. Let's calm down. And then they were like, yeah, we got you, bro. And then they accepted Poland and they accepted Serbia, or maybe it was I'm sorry, Kosovo. Um, and then they accepted um some other country out east. And I think it was Romania. And Russia was like, "Yo, all right, can we join NATO then? Since there's no like communism anymore, can we join?" And no. So this is literally walking us up to the line of conflict, and everyone's cheering it on, not knowing that okay, we have maybe 4 million reservists that volunteered, and
Hmm.
reservists age out. People that are in the reserves are prior military, or they're like civilians that do reserves just for the bennies and don't really get trained all the same as a regular military member would. They're not in the environment all the time. They're not conditioned for it all the time. So our 4 million reservists aren't really full combat troop capable. So we really only have like 1.5 million people that are ready to go at any given time and are in that environment and just like ready. 1.5 million that are spread out all over the world. So
Mhm.
my biggest concern is like, can we handle? I mean, we're stretched thin. The American empire is stretched thin. We have way too many foreign obligations, way too many
Oh,
economic
absolutely.
obligations. We're going to get decimated economically in a war because of all the upkeep it takes. I think it's $21 billion a year to upkeep like our aircraft fleet.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
it's
is it that
like,
high? I believe it.
I think it's $21 billion to maintain our 11 aircraft carriers. It's like $750 million a day to operate them. And I'm like, how the fuck do we even have the money for this? Like, we are negative, negative. I think we're making Charlie, how much money does America make a year?
How much does it bring in a year?
Yeah, do you know off the top of your head?
Let's look that. No, I don't know off the top of my head.
You see, like this is the problem too, is that I think we make like 16 or 17 trillion a year, and you know, w- we're expending. I think our national debt is at $30 trillion. Like we are going to be fucked, and we don't even produce our own shit. Like a
You mean
lot
tax
of
money?
yeah, for taxes.
Tax. It looks like the IRS in 2022 collected 5 trillion. That's in gross taxes.
Okay, so our tax rate, guys, is like we're just printing. We don't have money for this shit.
Two hundred
Like,
and sixty-two million of that had to go back in returns.
oh my God. You see now this is the see now this Charlie, this is exactly what I'm saying. Like we can't afford this shit. And imagine we went to war. Like all our shit's made in China. We don't have domestic manufacturing. We don't have domestic I'm surprised our bullets are even made in America. Um
Yeah, the only thing made in America is what Harley Davidson and friggin' ammunition at this point. So
literally, bro,
get you
literally.
a
I mean
box of
like
9 mil. Glocks are made in America now.
oh they are?
Yes, they are.
Great. We make civilian weapons and processed food and yeah, that's about it. And nothing else. I mean, our remember when our masks, we had no masks because all of our shit was made in China and the timber was from Canada, and we had to wait like 6 months for masks to even get mass produced again.
Hmm. Yeah, I
I mean,
remember that. Make
that's
your
like,
own CDC guideline type shit.
oh my God, I remember the make your own
Yeah.
era. That was fucked up. My mom still has a bunch of those too. Um, I just like it's just very concerning that we have an era where we don't make our own shit and we're trying to go to war. It's not like it was in the interwar years where we had factories of all different types and we had there was no global supply network. It was literally just national supply network and whoever we decided to trade with, and we didn't even have an income tax until 1913. We just we made our money through imports. That's it. We just made our money through imports and exports.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we should go back to something like that
we
potentially.
should, we should, because it's not. We're broke. We have no money. We need to.
You need
This
to
is the
nuke and
way.
pave though.
What'd you say?
You just got to start from a clean slate. You know what I mean? You almost need to
Yeah,
be a new country doing business as or something.
I get. Yeah, literally DBA as America too. Um, but what's crazy is like we don't have the bread for it. So I think we need to drastically cut back our military expenditure. Like people are talking about fiscal responsibility. It's like bro, you're talking about cutting administration cost. Like, yes, don't get me wrong. We have way too many bureaucrats at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. But
Mm,
we also have like a military that costs a shitload of money, and half of that's due to private contractors. I think if Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing were nationalized and not private companies with a board of directors and investors and shit, and we just nationalized them, we'd see a lot more money coming into America and being able to pay off our debt. Um,
mm.
Also, China could just call in and just be like, "Yo, pay us back our money right now," and we'd default. We'd have no money to pay them. The thing is
Yeah,
that we both have a parasitic relationship to each other too with China and America. Um, America and China need each other mutually to succeed each other to succeed and to fail. So China knows they could pull the plug on us and be like, yo, give us our money back, bitch. And America's like, yo, we buy so much Chinese shit that you literally can't afford to lose us as a market. And China knows this very well. So it's like, it's a catch 22 for them if they decide to do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a sticky situation, to
It's
say
a
the
very
least.
sticky situation. I don't know how it's going to end. I mean, I
What,
know
this
that
whole
with,
war thing and
oh
everything?
God, yeah, with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, I personally, and the thing is too, like, there's so much conflicting information. I don't even know what's true anymore. I don't even know, like if we go to war with Russia, I don't even know what I would do
I
because it's
doubt
like,
that would happen, but it is possible.
I mean, it's very possible.
If
Poland is
Biden wins
pushing
again, maybe.
possibilities there. I mean, it would depend if there was a Trump or DeSantis run, but I even feel like DeSantis would take us into World War III.
Probably. I mean, I'm not probably, but possibly. I don't really think World War III is likely with anybody in charge, but it can happen. It's like Biden wants it or something. I don't understand.
I don't think he
Russia
wants it.
seems to be the one who. I mean, they never invaded a NATO country, just to clarify.
Mm,
They basically took back an old Soviet, you know, an old Soviet state.
if, if,
And it's not the same as, we're acting like Russia is, taking over the world. Maybe they will, but to say that this is that, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And it's being made to look like
This is their Afghanistan.
it is their
I think they messed
Afghanistan.
up. I really do. I think they screwed up, but now they have to, continue to do this. Otherwise, they look like assholes.
If Russia fails in this war, they will split apart, and it's like of dire consequence for Russia to come out with some type of a victory in this situation because they were pushed to the point. And that's the thing. NATO wants to push Russia to the point. Um, I don't know why. See, this is what like I don't understand what NATO's end goal is either. Like you had Russia fully willing and capable to be a NATO country and join the Western world and join Europe in a new era of peace and prosperity. And you
Hmm.
could have used Russia to counter Afghanistan and China at the same time. You destroyed the Soviet Union. You could have expanded NATO. You could have renamed NATO. You could have called it the Great Allied Powers or the Democratic Coalition. And you could have rebranded it. It's not that dumb. It's still the same people, just rebranding it. But no, they're like, oh, well, we need some fucking scary thing to keep us unified. It's like, yeah, you had Al Qaeda and you had fucking China. It's like 1984. I don't know if you ever read it, but um, it's like in
George Orwell.
1980. Yeah, George Orwell. It's like when he was saying that there's just like the forever war all these wars are designed just to keep going to keep the tension so that way there's no unity and that way the bombs keep falling and there's more profits and people are divided. Because they don't want a global government. They don't want global unity, and I don't want a global government, but global
Yeah, I'm
unity would be
definitely against
nice.
that.
Yeah, global unity would be nice. And listen, conflict's inevitable, but like I'd rather it be like right now, I feel like this is just a very controlled conflict where, the West was like, okay, here's how we're going to make the play for the next 50 years. Who's going to be our enemy and who's not. And they designed it to be that way. And it's very dangerous because a lot of people's lives are at risk with this shit. And
Oh, the whole world, man. Like, what is it? Like 70% of the world would die in a nuclear war.
yeah, yeah. I feel like we should just free ball it, just let our
People think,
balls hang out.
I don't know. I guess people think that because it's not likely, which it isn't, that we should like toy around with it. Like, I don't understand the logic.
They want to see it used.
It's not likely that I get in a car wreck tomorrow, but do I go swerve down freaking, major highway and like, no, I'm probably not gonna die, but
Probably not,
you
but
know what I
it's
mean?
still
It's like it's
it's
not a
still
smart.
it's not a smart move at all. It's still fucking dangerous and it's like I don't get like I remember when the war first happened there were like Ukrainian flags everywhere and everyone was like standing in solidarity with them and it's like I get it's horrible, but you know, at the same time like it's not our country. Like no one gave a shit about, Iraq or fucking Yemen or Africa. I mean, like the entirety of the continent getting fucked on a day-to-day basis. No one gives a shit about that, but then Ukraine gets bombed. They're like, "Oh my God," because it's big bad scary Russia, and the Democrats were pissed off about 2016, so they blame the Russians. So now the Democratic rank and file is like, "Oh, Russia bad." And you got all the Cold War guys that are still alive, and they remember the Soviet Union. They're like, "Oh, see, the Russians are back at it." I think
Yeah,
that's
they got a
why.
hard on for Russia for some reason.
Yeah, bro, they snorted that Viagra and they're ready to go to Pound Town. Um, but it's just it's concerning. I think for our economy too, like we have such a bad like our cost of living is going up. The cost of food was going up.
Oh,
We
everything.
didn't have the like the gas price. Literally, this war um is destroying the entirety of the global food supply market. 7% of Russia and Ukraine before the war exported 25% of the world's grain. Ukraine 7%.
Hmm.
Africa and the Middle East are going to starve because there's going to be food inflation because wheat is not getting exported. And, we've seen grocery stores, here go up temporarily because they cut OPEC fucked with our oil and Russia fucked with our oil. So now you know, we had high gas prices and high delivery prices, which equated to high cost of goods because they need to cover delivery fees.
Hmm.
It's the war is this interconnected economy is really dangerous, and we need to have more of a nationally created economy. We can't have a um an interconnected economy if there's going to be war. I think that's one of the downfalls of the post World War II era, is we all try to be interconnected. It failed miserably because we're not past the conditions that necessitate war, which is the expansion of capital and markets. You know, Capitalism needs to have new markets in place for there to be continued growth of the exporting country. When the exporting country can no longer find new markets, it has to reconquer markets to re-expand them.
Right.
Like right now
You're
in
definitely
America.
an economics guy. Yeah, I'm not a big economics guy myself, but it's interesting.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the Marxist in me going burr. Um, but it's like we're recolonizing ourselves in America because now you have gentrification, which is like pushing a market out, low income, pushing that type of a market and clientele out, and bringing in a new clientele, upper middle class to wealthy, so that way they can buy new shit. I mean, we see it here in Long Island. We see it with all these properties going up around Tritech and shit. You know, creating apartments that are starting at 2,900 a month, 3,000 a month for a studio. Meanwhile, all the people that were paying 1,700, 1,800 a month in Patchogue
Hmm.
got pushed out and their businesses closed down, and now Main Street is like it's like a college town without the college. It's weird.
Can I mention another thing?
Yeah.
About that rent thing. Also, what's really funny about Long Island, I don't know if this goes on in other, maybe it's the whole state even of New York. You literally need a permit for anything, and at least the town of Brookhaven, like you're pretty much your property is not your property. You cannot rent it to anybody.
No, you
There's
can't.
a whole inspection process. The approvals probably take forever. I know they don't really approve people unless they have like they've been above and beyond.
Yeah, no, you
It's
gotta you
just
gotta
you
make
don't
it like
own
a
your
legit
property here.
apartment. No, you don't. It's like
And if you do get an illegal apartment, you're still paying a lot.
you're still paying a lot. And what'll happen is too is like if you even if you have like with sheds, right? If you have a shed and it is against a fence, it's
It's
like
against
you need a
code.
permit for it. If you're if
Actually, any shed, right? When you need a code, isn't that you need
do
to
you
have a guy come from the law department? I think
no shit, really.
the legal department comes to your house and checks it out.
Oh my God. It's like
Yeah.
England. It's like England. It's fucking horrible. There's even like we have like if you see those decks where they make like they're not attached to the fence or anything or attached to the house. They're like basically plywood, like those container things forklifts
Hmm.
use. Like I've seen people make decks out of those and you still need a permit for that because it's resting against the house.
Oh, any deck, any pretty much anything you do in your pool deck, whatever. Uh, a patio, any type of thing you do to your house on Long Island, it's going to be big permits. And if you go to sell your house and you don't get the permits, you're going to run into a whole headache.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's a disaster because the law department inspects every home. When you sell a home in Suffolk County, well, maybe not Suffolk County, maybe this is just our town.
Mm.
I'm sure it's the whole because each there's townships throughout the island that are authoritarian.
Mm,
You're gonna have to
yes.
pay more fees, and you're gonna have to get everything checked out. And it happens often. People go to sell a home, and next thing you know, they run into all these issues.
Oh Jesus, yeah. Or if you
Costing them,
renovate your home. If you renovate your home, forget it. You need so many permits just to do that.
yeah,
I remember we wanted to loft our ceiling. It took us like 3 to 6 months to just get like a guy to come down here to loft
yep.
it, you know.
That was probably was this the guy that actually did the
No,
work, like the carpenter, or no? You're talking
no,
about
no,
the
no.
actual legal guy.
The legal guy had to come down and like look at the plans and approve it.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny this state and everything, and they expect this revenue, and like when you don't pay it, they get mad. I mean,
And
it's
it
like
goes
maybe make the prices lower. People registering a car out of state, which I know a
from
lot about.
Delaware.
We can do a segment on that, by the way.
Yeah, we definitely could do that if I don't get put in prison. But
No, no, no. It's not illegal.
oh, it's not. Oh,
It's
okay.
illegal to drive your car on the road with the out of state tags. It's not illegal to register your car out of state.
Hmm.
But then again, like say you're a police officer and you look at it, you see a legitimate tag that actually comes back. Are you really going to look into, the vehicle
No.
traffic law? You
You
see
know,
legal tag, you see insurance,
there's an
pretty much legit.
it reminds me of the New York Wild West six shooter law that we're not going to talk about because we don't want to tell the Dems the fun little loophole.
Oh, loophole,
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that loophole. But
the
anyway,
Vermont loophole.
yeah, the Vermont loophole. Let's go with that one. But it goes back to like the price thing. It's just kind of like, we can't, no one can afford anything. The states can't even afford anything. That's why they're hitting us with all this bullshit. We're gonna reach a crisis. We're in a bubble right now. We're in a bubble and it's gonna pop.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And and the bubble's called Ukraine. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show again. I really appreciate you
Yeah, man.
pulling
Next
out
up,
and being like, "Yo, what's good?"
Vermont loophole closed.
Yeah, Vermont loophole closed. So yeah, Charlie, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks,
Um,
man.
it's thank you to our listeners for listening to episode 245. I'll see you guys tomorrow at
Nice knowing
6
you.
p.m.